Welcome to the Learning Lab Instructor Edition. This is where we talk about how to run a sustainable and scalable Mahjong teaching practice. Thank you so much for joining me today. Our topic for today is going to be how to handle interruptions during a lesson. So I hope you find this session helpful. If you have any comments along the way, feel free to write them in the live stream chat. And I am going to be referring to some show notes that are already published, and you'll be able to reference those later. Just as a reminder, or maybe if you're watching the repost, you're free to go to the digital source that I'll be sharing so that you can access those notes and maybe put into action something new today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Happy holidays, everybody. I'm just trying to clean my glasses here. All right, now let's see here. Happy holidays, Merle. I am going to just give you a minute to let me know if you have any questions to get us started. This is our safe space on the internet to ask questions about running a Mahjong teaching practice, specifically American Mahjong using National Mahjong League rules. Although any version can be helped with the content that we provide here and in the digital source that I'll be sharing with you. You just need to tweak it a little bit for your version. But for the most part, we talk about a teaching practice broadly. And then at times we may talk about American Mahjong specifically. So if you teach a different version, let me know in the live stream chat. And I don't see any questions so far. Hi, Jan, welcome. Merle, welcome. So let's see, let me just double check on the topic, make sure it's published. I'm pretty sure it is ready to go because I had it scheduled, so it should be there. Let's see. I also want to double check on the title. Let's see here. Yeah, here it is. So yes, it is out and it is not dated right. I need to update that. Let me see here if I can do that really quick because we might, actually, I don't think we'll be do any screen sharing here. This will just be discussion today. But I will give you the link so that you can access this for reflection later. Hello, Mary. Marla Williams. Marla. I thought it was Marla, but it's Marla. Marla Williams, welcome. Beverly, hello. Happy holidays. Mary, thank you so much for coming. Let's see, I want to just quickly update this for you so there's no confusion. Okay. All right, so let me give you the link as soon as it saves. The title of this is Leading with Focus, Navigating Disruptions with Grace. We're all human, so sometimes stress can come through if we're not in control. So hopefully this topic will be helpful because we're all human. Okay, so let me get this link for you if you want to follow along as we go. Here it is. All right, so I just want to read the opening paragraph just to kind of give us a framework. Teaching Mahjong means balancing flexibility with structure, and sometimes that balance is tested by interruptions. Questions, stories, or side chatter are normal in a learning environment, but how you respond determines whether they build connection or cause confusion. Handling interruptions skillfully helps maintain focus, respect, and flow while keeping students engaged and supported. That sounds like a very calming approach to the classroom, but calm is not always there. especially when interruptions happen. So you can set yourself up for success with the right mindset and the right tools that you can dig into when interruptions occur. Was everyone able to access that link? I don't know if that is clickable, but all right. So my first question is, if you can just think back to maybe recent lessons or even lessons that have never escaped your memory for whatever reason. What's an interruption that you handled well or wished you had handled differently? What did you learn? What's an interruption that you handled well or wish you had handled differently? What did you learn? I'll give you a minute to think about that, and then we can open it up, because I do remember one particular interruption that I had that I'm going to be sharing. I actually have a few. Oh yeah, these next questions are going to be good. Okay, so here we go. I don't see anyone sharing yet, so I'm going to go ahead and share my memory. I did a lesson at a JCC, not that that has any influence, it was just a rec center, but it was a JCC in Dunwoody, Georgia, Metro Atlanta. Everybody was lovely. We were having a great time. And this was I believe this was a 4-hour lesson, and there were 12 people there. So I had 3 tables. And because it was a longer session, we took a 5-minute break. This was right after the fundamentals. So we had gone through introduction to the tiles, what is a single pair pung kong. We did the block modeling where I showed them how to use, maybe put 2 pungs and a kong together with examples. So we went through that modeling. And then when people got back from this break, we were going to go over the National MAHJLIFE card. So I said, let's just take a quick break. At this time, I think this was maybe an hour and a half into the session. So I said, let's go ahead and incidentally, the time frame, let me explain this as well, because this has a impact on why this might have happened. We met from 10 to 2. So the lunch break was right in the middle, and people were instructed to bring a brown bag lunch. So what happened during this 5-minute break is 3 of the students who were friends left the room and walked all the way down the entire length of the main floor of the JCC to the cafeteria to get something to eat. And it took them 15 minutes. So I was in the class. We were waiting and waiting, because 3 people out of a 12-person session, that's a big group missing. So we waited, and they got back, and the ramifications of that is I had to trim the lesson. So we only got through, in the end, by the end of the day, we only got through barely picking and discarding a few tiles from the wall because of that 10-minute break. So I think some of the players were a little disappointed that they didn't get to finish a hand, because we had to get out of the room for other activities. So I had a big lesson learned there, and that was a big interruption to my day, and it impacted the plan. So I thought a lot about it on my way home and came up with some ways to deal with that. The first thing that, well, and incidentally, the question here is, what did I learn? We're going to go into that. But what could I have handled differently? I think I could have started the next portion of the lesson, and they should have just come back and sat down and caught up on their own. So I should not have waited. That was my lesson learned there. I should have just continued after 5 minutes because they knew it was a 5-minute break. So I should not have waited for them. That was my lesson learned. Stick to the schedule. So in addition to that lesson learned, I decided that I would not do brown bag lunches, because even if they had returned, those discussions that happen during lunch sometimes can lengthen a session. So I try not to schedule lessons or workshops or any of those things during a meal time. I'll do it either, let's say it would be a 2-hour session, let's say 9 to 11, or maybe a longer session would go from 1 to 5, or maybe noon to 4, and I would in the syllabus ask people to eat before, like eat an early lunch. And that way there'll be no meal time taken away from the lesson plan. So that was my biggest impact, where I even had students complain to the recreation center that they didn't get to play the game as much as they wanted to. So, I felt bad, and I thought, all right, well, I'm going to turn coal into diamonds here and learn from this. And those were my lessons learned. Does anybody else have one that they want to share? I think we have a couple here. Oh my gosh, yeah. When a new group starts and a student brings up their personal mahjong story, like a monologue, how do you break into that? Oh yeah. You learn to get 3 stories out of the way right after the intro. 3 stories. Mary shared during a second lesson, one person there for the first time. Oh yes. Someone who had been to a small group prior session begins side instruction. We're going to go into that. An extra information that jumped ahead for a newbie. Oh yes, absolutely. We're going to talk about that. So there's always lessons learned. As a matter of fact, if you don't already have a log or a journal of some kind, after you do a session, document lessons learned. And I'll remember to upload a lessons learned file that I use. It's just, it'll be a template that you could fill in and make your own. So it'll be in Excel, and it should convert to numbers, I think is what it's called, for the Mac version of a spreadsheet. So you'll be able to convert it, but there are columns in there that allow you to document lessons learned. And I came up with this idea for small business because I worked at Ball Aerospace for 10 years in my younger days, and we did lessons learned all the time. I worked in the quality assurance department. So I took those skills and I adapted them to my own business so that I could have continuous process improvement. So being an administrator in my younger days really has helped me in my small business. So I will upload this tool for you, but I highly recommend that you document your lessons learned for your lessons, workshops, and even talks. If you do signature talks where you're on stage at a bigger event where it's not really a classroom environment, but you're on stage, lessons learned can really help you improve your speaking stream, I guess you could say. So, because it is a little bit different than running lessons, but you always have lessons learned. And by studying those, you can avoid issues going forward, or look at those lessons learned, see common threads, and then create processes or changes to the way that you do things so that you can have that continuous process improvement. So I will make a note right now to update or upload that lessons learned file. Let me just make a quick note. I think there is a lessons learned file already in the digital library. If you're a guild member, you'll be able to find that probably in the digital library if you just type lessons learned in the search. Upload lessons learned template. Okay, so now I won't forget that. You'll see that later. So about an hour after the episode, if you look in the show notes, there'll be a link for that in the video description. You'll be able to download that file and use it like a journal, especially if you have a big lesson learned. Clearly, if you don't have a lesson learned and everything went really well, then just skip it for that particular one. But anytime you have a big lesson learned, like the one I shared, document it. And then what you do is once a month, study your lessons learned, look for those common threads, create some improvements to your SOPs, standard operating procedures. Or before you go to a lesson, like the night before, review your lessons learned just as a reminder of what not to do for your next gig. So let's see, documentation, great advice. Yes, you can look forward to that file later. Okay, so the next question is, how do you manage students who teach over you or dominate class time? So this is two different situations. Two different situations here. These probably should be split out because dominating class time could show up in different ways. So let's just break this apart. How do you manage students who teach over you? So Mary, I think it was Mary, what did you do when that happened, when a student started doing some side coaching during your lesson? Were you able to intervene? And if you did, how did you handle that? And I do have a suggestion. However, I just want to make sure before I share it that you understand the approach, because I shared this idea with somebody and they did it wrong and people got their feathers in a ruffle. So let's see. Oh, Mary, thank you so much for joining as a channel member. I appreciate your support. Okay, so just in case Mary is not in a position to share about that interruption, and please feel free to share just the same in the chat and I'll read it, but I'll go ahead and share what happened to me. When I did a lesson, one of my lessons learned was somebody who was sharing from a previous experience, and it derailed my lesson plan. So they were teaching strategy when I was sharing about the Charleston. They started going into the Charleston options and strategies on how to decide whether to pass blind or stop the Charleston. And I was not there yet. That was coming. And I don't recall what I did during the class because it took me by surprise. So what I did afterwards is I decided that I was not going to ever let that happen again. So I decided that going forward, as part of my introduction, I would say, well, the first thing I did was I said during the introductions, I would share about myself very briefly. I would talk about how long I've been playing, how long I've been teaching, why I decided to start doing lessons, and then I opened it up to introductions in the room. Now, this works if you have a small group. If you have a large group, like 30, 40, 50, upwards of that in the room, you're not going to be able to do this. But if you have a small group, let's say 8 to 12, up to 12 people in the room, you might be able to do introductions, which is good, especially if you have multiple sessions, because you want people to build relationships. So I asked people to share their name, how they were introduced to Mahjong, and what was their biggest pain point. So that's what they were going to share. So how they were introduced to Mahjong and if they had lessons before. That was a key piece to that. So their name, how they were introduced to the game, and if they've had lessons before, and then their biggest pain point. Those three things. And I asked them to be brief. So as people were sharing, I was able to identify people who had learned something before, whether they learned from a friend, a family member, or maybe they even took a class. because then I would be prepared to heighten my observation with them and listen for any times where they might interject with their own experience. So once we finish with that, I conclude by sharing, okay, well, thank you all for sharing. I am really happy to hear that some of you have had lessons before. I just want to be clear, there's one instructor here, me. I am the only instructor here, so if you ever feel the urge to share from your past experience, please refrain from doing that, because I've got a plan. I have a lesson plan that I want to follow. In order for me to do that and deliver the value I promised to you, I've got to stay on track. And I don't want to jump ahead with things like skills and strategies that you might feel the urge to share. So please refrain from doing that. And I promise you that when we go through my lesson plan, you're going to be very happy with the results. So if you do it, something like that, just make it clear that you are the only instructor, and that anybody who's had previous lessons should not interject with their own experience. And if somebody does, you just remind them, who's the teacher? Please don't teach. Let me teach, because I've got all kinds of goodies planned for you. So try to follow up with some kind of a playful response or some way to lighten the mood, because you don't want to spank somebody in public. So you want to be mindful of that. I did share this idea with another instructor, and their delivery came across authoritarian, and people were very offended. So please be mindful, if you use this technique, to be gentle, to be friendly, and do it in a light, with a light touch, and then add humor or some kind of playfulness if you can, because otherwise people may get offended or may feel controlled or spanked in public, and you just don't want to do that. So let me see here. Okay, I don't see any other comments. Does anybody have an experience similar to that? And if so, share with us what you have done in the past. But for me, sharing that I am the only instructor, and please refrain from sharing your own experience, because I've got a plan. That is what took care of that, and it never happened again. So that, I think, is key. And then as far as dominating time in class, does anybody have any stories about a lesson plan that maybe got derailed because of socialization, or maybe a player who shared a story, kind of like what Beverly was saying, sharing a story that took up more time than you had allotted? Perhaps you would say, please share briefly your experience in the game, and somebody goes on a monologue for 5-10 minutes. You know, what do you do in those situations? That can be a little bit awkward. Not everybody has public speaking training, and so they don't have that self-awareness. When they're asked to share something briefly, they may not have that control set up in their minds. They may not be able to track the time that it takes to share a story. Okay, so I don't see any comments. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go to the next question, because I think this is the way to handle that. So the next question is, what is your go-to phrase or signal for getting things back on track? Go-to phrase or signal for getting things back on track. I smile because I have one, and it was from a lesson learned, another lesson learned. I'm going to give you a minute to think about it, and then I'll share. Okay, so this situation that happened in a class, and incidentally, it was at the same place with the group who left and came back. This was another lesson learned from there. Okay, Beverly has one. Let's focus for a moment. This is important, and look at the slide. Okay, that's good. Anything that interrupts typically can work, but not always. Okay, so this same event that I did with 12 people, and I was the only instructor, and those 12, it wasn't planned. It was supposed to be 8 people max because I'm the only instructor. And my guideline is 1 instructor for every 8 students. So had I known that there were drop-ins, I would have had another assistant with me, because teaching 12 people how to play the game from scratch, that is challenging, to say the least. So after the class, I thought about how I was going to handle that going forward. So actually, let me back up, because I didn't. I came up with something on the fly. I just remember because I got a complaint, and then there was a lesson learned from the complaint. So let me back it up. So I found out that same day that we had drop-ins. It was supposed to be 8. We actually had 12. And we were doing the class, and it was feeling a bit out of control. I was feeling spread too thin. So on the fly, I said, okay, I want to do some exercises so everybody find a partner so we could condense the class. Now, I didn't say condense the class, but in my mind, I was trying to think of how could I make it feel like I'm only teaching 8 people. And the solution was to create a partnership. So we would get that third table to join people on 2 tables. So for me, it would feel like I'm teaching 8 people, because I was feeling stretched super thin. So those 4 people from that other table partnered with others on the other 2 tables. And it worked. It worked. However, there was a complaint. And so people complained about not being able to finish the game at the end of that session. And then people complained because they had to sit with somebody else, and they felt like they didn't get individualized attention. But how was I going to do that as one person teaching 12? It's just not, that's a big ask. So the lesson learned from that, even though it worked during the class and people were a little put off by it, I figured out ways to make it work. So in my class description for the venue, but also in my own description as I share about it with potential clients, I say that some teamwork will be involved so that the players understand that they're going to be working in teams. Everyone should know what to expect when you go into a class. So having a syllabus is a key to managing expectations. And there's another file that I'm going to make available for you, a template for a syllabus. If you don't already use a syllabus, I highly recommend it. It's just a 1-page description of the class, what you're going to cover, what people are going to walk away with, basically the what's in it for me. Have you heard of WIIFM? What's in it for me? So you want to give that to them, but also you want to have expectations of them. So don't be on your phone. Please silence your phone. If something comes up that's crucial, a family member or what have you, please exit the room, things like that. But also in there should be a bullet. Some teamwork will be involved, or you will be working in a partnership format or something like that. Something to let them know that they're going to have a partner, because then they'll be expecting it. If they sign up for the class and they see that in advance, they won't think anything of it. But if you pop it on them in the class, they're going to feel some sort of way, kind of like what happened to me. So that was the first lesson learned there. Then the other thing I did to remind people is I came up with a phrase. So in the next session, I introduced Buddy Up. I call, when I work with pairs in a workshop or lesson, I call it the buddy system. And I actually write about this in some of my hot toy letters and also lesson planning. Use the buddy system. Basically, you ask people to partner up in the first session. And then you say, anytime I say buddy up, you're going to find your partner, and you condense the class. So, and there are lots of benefits to doing that. One is it's going to feel to you like you're teaching fewer people. To them, they're going to get synergy with them, with another person. The other thing that is really good for this buddy system is when there are different skill levels in the class, and you can choreograph partnerships so that someone who's not getting the class partners with someone who is getting the class, getting the concepts. So you have someone who's maybe falling a little behind with someone who's moving ahead, and it kind of balances out. And they may be able to, by example or just by leadership, be able to bring along this person who maybe is falling behind. So there are so many benefits to using this buddy system. So consider those things. And I'm also going to add this syllabus to the downloads. So upload syllabus template. Okay. So now 2 things you can expect there. Does anybody, so now Beverly did say, let's focus a minute. I like Buddy Up because it's super quick. Or another one you can do is Huddle. That's another one I've used before. I'd say, okay, huddle up. So Buddy Up and Huddle Up. So if I ever say huddle or huddle up, then everyone has to stop talking. So I would say in the introduction, okay, I'm going to be teaching you this really complex game. You're going to love it, but sometimes we're going to get into nitty gritty. So when I cover something new, I'm going to say huddle up or huddle, something like that. When I do, you're going to stop talking and focus so that I can share something really important that I want you to know. So what's my keyword? And then they'll repeat it. And so during the session, anytime I say huddle up or huddle, what have you, they're going to stop talking. It's kind of like, do you remember when you were in kindergarten and the teacher would flicker the lights? Or if you go to a play and the intermission is over and they flicker the lights, it's kind of like that. It's some kind of a sensory interruption that can get their attention and remind them that we're here for a purpose. I need your attention, and you don't have to shout or whistle. So those are my tips there. So now, any questions so far, or have any memories come up for you in regards to these questions that you want to share? An interruption that you handled well, or wish you handled differently? What did you learn? So some lessons learned there. The other one was, how did you manage students who teach over you or dominate the class time? And then finally, what is your go-to phrase or signal for getting things back on track? Those are some really great prompts to help you remember to past lessons and try to pull out some lessons learned so that you have some ways of improving what you do going forward and you don't fall into those traps, because it can be really awkward. All right, so I don't see anything right now as far as sharing, so I'm going to keep going. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through 4 different points, and then we're going to end with reflections. So the first point is normalize brief disruptions. Normalize brief disruptions. Interruptions are part of the learning process. And not only that, it's just part of being human. We have needs and we have desires. And sometimes those desires are, humor, socializing, just being spontaneous. So with that, acknowledge them calmly and model grace under pressure. Sometimes that's easier said than done. A quick smile, and redirect keeps the atmosphere positive while showing students that questions are welcome, just not at the cost of clarity. Now, this is really important, especially when somebody derails your lesson. So usually what I say is, that is a great question, and we're going to cover it in the next segment. So we're going to table that and circle back to it later. So you don't need to address it. Let them know that it's coming up. Just make sure that you cover it and you don't forget, because then they're going to feel marginalized. Okay, any questions about normalize the brief disruptions? Acknowledge any questions that may derail your plan. And let me just look on here and see. Okay, I do have another point in here, so I'm going to share another lesson learned coming up on point 4. Okay, so we're going to continue now with the second point. Use gentle redirection. When someone veers off topic or dominates the floor, steer back with language that's kind but firm. And here are some examples. Oh, I kind of already gave one. Excellent point. I'm going to park that on our board so we can revisit that after the demo. Okay, this is what I was going to share, but I was going to do it earlier, but this is actually our example. When I go to a lesson, I would bring a portable whiteboard. A portable whiteboard, so it's like a, maybe, I'm thinking like a 24 by what have you, 36 or something like that. So it's a pretty big whiteboard, kind of the size of a nice portrait. So it would require an easel. So I would bring a portable easel that had like telescopic legs, and then a portable whiteboard that was big enough to be able to see in a, let's say, a classroom size of about 30 to 40 people, but not so big that I can't carry it or put it in a cart, a collapsible cart in my car. So I would bring this whiteboard and markers, and then anytime something came up, I would write it on the whiteboard. It's called a parking lot. That's the tool. So anytime somebody brings something up that's maybe ahead on your lesson plan, put it on, park it, put it on the whiteboard. That's called parking. So put it on the whiteboard, and then later, as you're going through, you can mark it off when you cover it. And that even shows value delivered right there. So use the parking lot idea. Okay, the next one is, let's jot that down for our Q&A roundup. I want to make sure we stay in a flow for this part of the lesson. So if somebody has a question that is maybe a bit of a tangent, write it on another section of the whiteboard, or maybe even create sections before the class. For example, topics, just general topics. And then in another section, Q&A roundup. And that way you can remind yourself where to put it and where to go when the time is right. So any of those questions that are tangents, write them there, and then you can circle back to them, and everybody will feel served in the end. The last example is, that's worth exploring. Let's note it for later so we can give it the proper attention. So you're not going to stop what you're doing aside from writing it on the whiteboard or on a notepad or whatever method you want to use. So they're going to feel that you're serving them and delivering value, but you're in control because you are sticking with your lesson plan where you've delivered, where you have promised some kind of an outcome by diverting these questions and interruptions. You're going to be able to stay on track and still circle back and serve those people. So these are some examples that you can use to help you with those situations. The next point is set expectations early. And we've talked about this already. Start each session with a brief reminder of norms. When questions are, say basically when questions are welcome, when to hold comments, and how to stay on pace. Clear boundaries prevent most interruptions from escalating into distractions. So there's tools that you can use, like the parking lot idea, so that you can keep control of this. But if you start with the end in mind, or set everybody up for success by setting the expectations early, you may not even have to use a parking lot. So in your syllabus, you could set expectations. And then when you do the welcome and introductions, you can set expectations there as well. So any questions about setting expectations early? I don't see any comments, so we're going to go to number 4. Balance, flexibility, and focus. Not every detour is bad. Some deepen understanding and spark valuable discussion. So you've got to be able to give and take a little bit, especially with adults, because of the way we learn. We learn differently than kids. Kids don't have a frame of reference. They don't have a lifetime of experience. So they have a different kind of a curiosity. And typically with kids, it is teacher-led, because all the experience is coming from the instructor or the teacher. But for adults, we all have a lifetime of experience. So teaching adults should be more student-led. So if things come up in a class where you are able to discern the level of importance of a given interruption, or maybe a topic where you should, let's say, spend more time on, or maybe modify your plan on the fly to allow time for this new concept because it's of interest. So you have to be able to be a little bit spontaneous and modify your plan on the fly based on the needs of the group with adults. So yes, you can set up expectations, but you also need to be flexible and figure out what you can modify as you go. And one key part to that is, on your lesson plan, identify 1 or 2 points that are optional or that could be trimmed. So on your lesson plan, you could put in parentheses optional, so that if a discussion comes up that takes longer than you expected, or maybe something happened in the class where there was a delay of like 10 minutes, you can trim or cut content wherever it says optional. So if you have a 45-minute lesson plan and there's a segment on there for, let's say, 10 minutes, and it says optional, something comes up, cut it. Or if you still want to cover it, still cover it, but trim it. Make it more of a mention, and that you'll provide more information in a follow-up email or something like that. So try to identify some kind of content, or maybe a step in your plan that is optional. And that will give you some of that wiggle room that will allow you to accommodate any conversation that comes up, or points that come up that you want to spend a little more time with, that you really can't plan for. Some of those magical moments happen and you want to leverage them. So having that optional component of your lesson is going to be key to being able to have that flexibility, so you can then focus on things that are of interest with the people in your class. Okay, the last point is maintain group momentum. Oh yeah, I have a good one on this one. So here, use tools and cues to keep the pace. Lesson plan. If your lesson plan is in your head, that's great, but sometimes things can happen in the class where it might get a little muddled. So if you have an actual lesson plan on paper or on your phone, if you use digital devices, having a lesson plan actually mapped out, especially if you have notes in there for things like optional where you can trim and cut, that's going to be key. So have some kind of a plan, a lesson plan where you can hit milestones. Some, let's see here, things like you could even use timers for exercises. Like if you say, for example, okay, we're going to do some random pulls. I want you to do 3. Take 10 minutes to do 3 random pulls, and everybody can work independently. And then you can be off to doing maybe one-on-one with somebody who maybe missed a class or something like that. So set a timer and say you have 10 minutes, do 3 random pulls, and then everyone is off doing independent work. Another thing you can do is have those verbal markers or signals that we talked about earlier. Let's pause that thought and move on to the next hand or something like that. Some kind of a signal to give you that moment to pull everybody back on track and continue forward, because you don't want to lose momentum. And it allows you to stay aligned and keep everybody engaged. So another thing to consider with momentum, I don't have this written in here, but I do want to mention it because I think it's important. And that is how many sessions you offer and how the duration of each session. This comes into planning, so it's going to be before you advertise, and that way people know what to expect as well. So you wouldn't want to make any changes on the fly. But I've seen that a lot of lessons for American Mahjong specifically are 6 2-hour sessions or 12 2-hour sessions. I have found in my own practice that doesn't work for me. And I have heard from people who have used that framework and that they also have had challenges with that. In my experience, fewer and longer sessions work well with adults because they have a longer attention span. It's going to depend on your demographic though. So if your demographic is, let's say, 30s to 60s, they're going to be able to sit through a 4-hour class. And because American Mahjong is a complex game, I think the sweet spot is a 3-hour class. That allows you to gain traction. It allows you to keep them engaged for those 3 hours. Then you do a break so they can digest it and practice, come back for another 3 hours where you can engage again. And the momentum that you have with 2, let's say 3-hour classes, or maybe 3 3-hour classes where the last session is gameplay with coaching, you can really gain momentum because you have longer sessions where you have that longer engagement. You could cover more content and you don't have to do as much review as well. If you do 6 2-hour sessions, you've got to splice it out and you've got to do more review every single time. Every session you got to review because you only covered two hours of content. So it just feels very, it's just spread thin, diluted. Whereas if you do longer sessions and fewer sessions, you can concentrate it, get them engaged, go deep instead of wide. Deep. And if you can go deep and wide, that's even better. And again, it depends on your demographic. If your demographic is 70s to 90s, they're not probably going to be able to sit for 3 hours. So then maybe multiple 2-hour sessions is fine, but then you're going to want to make sure that they know what to expect with 2-hour sessions, that it's going to be a long haul. So think about your demographic and plan it out so that it meets their needs. Any questions on these talking points? We had normalize brief disruptions, use general redirection, set expectations early, balance flexibility and focus, and then maintain group momentum. Those are the talking points. And I don't see any comments. So if anybody has any comments on these or any stories that came up that you'd like to share, let me know. You can always share in the comment section below the video as well. And also, some of these situations that happen can make really great white papers or lesson studies, less like a case study kind of a document where instructors can learn from each other in these situations, so they can avoid some of those awkward situations themselves. Okay, so I don't see anything here. So I'm going to go on to reflections now. So the first, and we have a few here. The first one is, think of a recent class where your pacing slipped. What caused the detour and how could you handle it differently next time? So pacing, I did share a story about that. And the optional concept, that really helps. If you're not doing something like that right now, I highly recommend that. So think about times in the past where maybe your schedule has slipped. And that doesn't have to be just within a class. It could be within a series of lessons. You might need to trim a whole session in order to cover content that you weren't able to hit earlier in the plan. So you might even have a whole session that is optional, maybe like 2 gameplay with coaching, so that if content is missed, have the second to the last session be that content, or modify it as you go and kind of filter it down and still do a gameplay with coaching at the end. So I could see how that could be helpful. And this too is where you want to make sure that you have a document, or whether it be digital or on paper, so that you can see how you can make those adjustments as you go. Okay, I don't see any comments. So here's the next reflection. How do you personally define a productive interruption versus a distracting one? How do you personally define a productive interruption versus a distracting one? This circles back to one of the talking points where you have to discern whether an interruption has value that you can leverage versus one that you can acknowledge and then move on. You got to be able to discern the difference. But still, having that parking lot, the whiteboard, that's going to be a key tool, I think. Because even if there's something that's borderline, park it. Okay, next. Oh, here's one. Marlo, or Marla, I'm sorry, Marla. No comment at this time. Oh, because the session is so good. You're just absorbing, just taking it all in. Okay, and you'll be able to watch it again too, by the way. Okay, next. What part or which part of your lesson tends to invite most off-topic moments? And what might that reveal about your teaching rhythm? Oh, this is good. This is really good. Which part of your lesson tends to invite the most off-topic moments? You know what you could do on that whiteboard? You could even make, you know how I was talking about blocking it out and making space based on your plan for the day, your framework? Have a section of it blocked off for your learning objectives. Like if you have 3 learning objectives, just write 1, 2, 3, and then any of the off topics that come up, put it within those bins, so that you know over time where these interruptions occur. Now, whether or not you cover them then and there or later, or whether it belongs in a different bucket, you could always draw a line, redirect it, or do whatever you need to make a point. But having some way to know where these off-topic interruptions come in, that's going to be key, because it will help you refine your lesson plan going forward. Maybe you need a new sequence with your learning objectives. If your learning objectives are out of sequence, then you're going to get those interruptions, or people are going to try to jump ahead. If people keep trying to jump ahead, maybe you need to look at your sequencing. Okay, so now, what tone or phrase helps you maintain authority and warmth when redirecting the group? Now, and we talked a lot about this already, but it is key to make sure that you're being relatable and that you're not being too authoritative, because then you're going to be no fun. We're playing a game after all. So you want to keep the fun in the room. Okay, don't suck all the energy out of the room by being authoritative. This is where, when I shared that idea of I'm the only teacher, somebody took that too far. So clearly I didn't deliver that. I think I take a little bit of responsibility for that, because this person took it in such a way that they made themselves an authority, and they delivered it in such a way that was super heavy-handed. As a matter of fact, I heard from someone who took a class from this person, and they told me that their entire demeanor was that way the whole lesson. So that one recommendation that I had, they really took it far. So please, if you use that, I am the only instructor, be very light-hearted with that, but still make sure that people in your class know that you are the instructor and that you have a plan. So just be very careful when you are being authoritative that people are not feeling marginalized or spanked, because you do not want that experience with anybody in your class, because that could hurt your reputation, and that you do not want. You want to make sure that people are having fun. You want to make sure that people are learning, that people are not shut down or people are not withdrawn. You want to draw people out while still maintaining that level of authority so that you can keep control of your lesson plan and deliver the value you promise. And the final reflection is, how can you make students feel heard without losing momentum or control of the lesson? That kind of ties it all together, really. How do you make sure students feel heard without losing momentum or control of the lesson? And I think for me, the key is the parking lot, that whiteboard. Even though it's kind of a pain to lug something like that, it is going to really help you keep control of the class in every situation, really. You could even change your plan on the fly and document it right there on the board and say, okay, we were going to cover this, but we're going to cover that maybe in the next session. And that way you can modify it and they can visually see what the changed plan is for the day. There are a lot of ways you can use a whiteboard to help you keep control of the class. Let's see. And the other thing too, and I actually learned about this from another instructor in the guild who does a post-session email. After every session, they do an email, which does take a little bit of time, but I think it's really a great tool, especially if anybody's questions go unanswered. If you run out of time and you're not able to cover something that you parked, and maybe you didn't even get there through the Q&A session, you just flat ran out of time and had to leave. Always look at your documentation for the class, whether it be on the whiteboard, whether it be on your mobile device or a piece of paper that has any kind of comment, whether it's off topic or not, whether it was something that you're covering later in the future sessions. As long as your students feel acknowledged, you'll be okay. But if something goes unacknowledged, then you could have you may feel a little impact there. And doing a post-session email is a great way to tie everything up. You could even in the email say something like, one of our students had a great question that I wasn't able to cover, so let's talk about it right now, and then go into it in the email. Then everybody gets to benefit from it, and that student feels heard. So using some kind of a follow-up email is a great way to do that, or even a voice call. There are tools that you can use, and it could actually be a value add to the class. So when you do a lesson, let's say you do 3-hour sessions, you could use something like, what is it called? Voxer. It's a walkie-talkie app. VOXER. It's kind of like a group chat. So you can use WhatsApp, you can use Voxer, you could use even Messenger and create a group, a private group. And through that, you can communicate. So if something maybe wasn't covered in class, use Voxer. Instead of sending an email, get on Voxer, and you can leave a voicemail to the entire group. So they would even hear your voice, which is another different kind of a touch, a different format other than written word. So for people who are auditory learners, using something like Voxer is a great option. And it shows value add. If you take my class, you're going to be able to join Voxer for a private chat feature where you'll be able to hear my voice share things about the class. And you would need to just make sure to have some other planned content that you'll be able to deliver if you do offer something like that. So it's not just recaps, but it's additional content that you can deliver at least once during the session, so that they're using Voxer not just for recaps, but also added content as a bonus. So that concludes today's session. I hope you found it helpful. This again was called Leading with Focus, Navigating Disruptions with Grace. Any comments or questions? Thank you so much for joining me today. It is a special day. I hope that you're enjoying family, friends, and even some downtime. I don't see any questions, so I think I'll go ahead and sign off. I'll give you maybe another few seconds to respond, though, because I know we do have a bit of a delay. I will update the show notes for today. Let me show you how you can get to it, actually, because you may not even know what I'm talking about. Let me go to my home page and then share my screen. This way, too, it'll give you a few minutes to think about the things we talked about. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. Oh, thank you, Marla. Okay, let me share my screen so I can show you how to get to the show notes for these sessions. We meet every Thursday from 1 to 2:30, depending on the content. It's 2:05, so we're going to do a shorter session today. And if there are a lot of questions and demo interaction, we go longer, but sometimes we'll do shorter sessions. So it goes between 1 hour to 90 minutes typically. Let me share my screen real quick so you can get to the show notes. And you can watch previous episodes. We have lots of episodes already. This is a new feature on my YouTube channel. So there are videos that you can watch. So here is my website, MAHJLIFE.com. Okay, MAHJLIFE.com. And if you come to my website, this is the home page, go to Instructors and then scroll down to Learning Lab. It's the fourth one down for now. I have a duplicate here though. Apply to join and join the guild. I need to remove one of those. They go to the same place. So it'll be the third one down eventually. So click Learning Lab. And that is going to take you to the Learning Lab, which is it's actually a Facebook group, a private Facebook group. If you use Facebook, feel free to go there and look for Learning Lab #MAHJLIFE. It is a place where both players and instructors get the support they need. Players ask questions in a safe space, and questions are answered by vetted instructors. And vetted instructors are also supported by mentors. So it is an ecosystem where everybody can learn about the game and how to teach it and play it with greater confidence. So feel free to join if you use Facebook. This YouTube version is for those people, but also people who don't use social media. So it's kind of a win-win all the way around. So once you get on the Learning Lab, you're going to scroll down and click Instructor Edition Content, this button right here. And that is going to take you to a special repository called the Learning Lab Instructor Edition Resource Hub. And it explains everything about it. You can submit a lesson case study. I did mention that earlier in this episode because we are gathering lesson case studies so that we can all learn from each other. You can also join the Facebook group here and then join the guild. But down further is where you can search previous show notes. Use keywords to find subject matter that you're interested in. We do have subjects or categories. So any of the show notes will be organized by category. And if you scroll down, you'll see featured articles. And we have popular articles, newest articles, and then recently updated articles. So under newest is where you'll find the day's show notes. So these show notes here for today, they were up earlier. They usually go up at 11 o'clock the day of the event. So if you click that, it'll take you to the show notes for the day. And from there, you'll be able to watch the episode. So after this episode, I'll update the link to this button and you'll be able to click that and rewatch the video. Or if you're watching the repost, that's how you can get to other episodes. And you can see here's our opening prompts, then our talking points if you want to review them, and the reflections so that you can think back on your lessons to try to find lessons learned from your own teaching practice. And this is where also I'll add a button for downloads as we discussed earlier. So that is how you find this resource hub. If you have any trouble, feel free to send me an email. I'd be more than happy to help. Thank you again for being here. Moderators, thank you very much for helping monitor the chat. And thank you for your participation. I appreciate the questions and the engagement. It's a pleasure to have you here with me, and I look forward to seeing you next week. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, consider subscribing. Click the little gray bell if you do. That way you'll get notification for when I post new videos, and you won't miss an opportunity to learn a new strategy or pick up an insight to the game that could give you an advantage at the table. Between now and the next video, may all your picks be keepers.